Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Worcester City Council held by Zoom video conferencing and YouTube this Monday, August 17th, 2020. It's after 7:30 p.m. We are back after a 6-week hiatus. Have a lot on the agenda this evening. However, just want to mention because of Labor Day, the next regularly scheduled council meeting will be Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Before you call roll, I would like to let you know, Ms. DePaula, that Mark Cavan did inform me he would be unable to attend, and I'd just like to give a shout out to his little fellow and hope he's doing well. So with that, I would ask you to please call the roll.
Mr. Ansel.
Here.
Mr. Bostancic.
Here.
Mr. Cavan's absent. Mr. Myers.
Here.
Mr. Sanders.
Here.
Mr. Silvestri.
Here.
Ms. Warden.
Here.
And we do have a quorum, so we can proceed. The agenda will remain as presented, and it's lengthy, as I had originally stated in my opening remarks. And at this time, I would ask that you stand and join the members of City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay. First thing to do after that is to approve the minutes of July 6, 2020, which seems a long ways ago, but the last 6 weeks went pretty fast, frankly. Anyone would like to move to approve?
Motion to approve, Mr. President, Mr. Silvestri.
All right, Mr. Silvestri moved to approve the July 6 minutes. Is there a second?
Second. President Bidakis, Scott Myers.
Second by Mr. Myers. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the minutes of July 6, 2020 are approved. I don't know what happened to my voice. I was fine until we got on camera.
Hey, whoever's closest to Mike's office, take him some water.
Yeah, I just had a sip. Communications from the mayor. Welcome, Mayor. Hopefully you had a good time away from council, and now the heavy lifting begins once again.
Yes, sir. It's been a nice summer break. In fact, I just got back from a trip to the beach, so I'm feeling rested and ready to go here. So welcome back to all the council members. We hope you had a nice break. We're glad that we didn't have to interrupt it with any business this year, and we have now got a very active schedule for this evening. So lots of good things happening though. So to start out, things have been fairly smooth over the summer break. So we're pleased to say that in this virus ridden world that we're living in. You've probably noticed that the Southeast Quad is almost finished. I think they have put a first course of pavement down. Really all the bricks are done up through the main part. The alley, I think, still has a little bit left to do, but things are definitely moving forward well. The curfew in the downtown started last Tuesday, August 11th, and so far we've had no issues, no problems, no arrests. So it seems to have helped the situation down there. Our pools closed this past Saturday. In fact, I think Mr. Millay and his son were the last two in Freelander Pool, if I'm not mistaken. Really, it was a real good run. We are very glad that we were able to open the pools. We had well over 1,000 families utilize it, which comprised about over 11,000 people were served by the pools being open, the pool and the spray park. So I think that was a nice service to our community. The county held an organizational meeting today to establish a land bank. So that is actually on one of your resolutions this evening, Resolution 2020-42. So we hope that you see merit in approving us being a partner in the land bank situation. And I think it will hopefully have some good merits for our city. Andre sent all of you council members the first half of the 2020 financials last Wednesday. Here's just some very brief recaps. Our next net tax receipts are 4.6% under budget. Building permit values are 64.8% below last year. County sales taxes uncharacteristically are flat, down to less than 1% compared to last year. So people are still buying things here in the county. The total general fund revenues are 2.3% under budget. But the good news is our general fund expenditures are 5.9% under budget. So really, we had an excess of revenues over expenditures for the first 6 months of $328,234. So we're operating in the black, and things aren't as bad as a lot of people were prognosticating. So we're feeling thankful for that. Finally, I would like to take some time to show you a video of an awards ceremony that was put on by Police Chief Matt Fisher. We would like you to do this. We would have liked to do this at a council meeting, but due to the virus, this is the easiest way to show this. We are actually honoring 3 of our police officers for their exemplary performance of their duties. Nathaniel Koch, 1 year with our police team, Michael Egbert, 1 year with our police team, and Christopher Hartzler, 4 years with the police division. All 3 were given the life-saving award for controlling the bleeding on a call that they responded to. And Nathaniel Koch was given the award of merit for his actions on a call with an autistic boy. So with that, the video is a little on the long side, but I think you will see why we wanted to show it, because it really highlights what our team does. So Mr. Millay, would you please play the video for us? There we go.
I can't hear him. Can others hear him?
No.
No. Hey, Jonathan, remember to share the sound.
No audio, Jonathan.
Share the sound, Jonathan.
My apologies. 1 minute, please.
We want to take a minute to recognize some of our officers and their actions. So we're going to start with Patrolman Koch, Patrolman Hartzler, Patrolman Egbert with their masks on. Maybe you don't recognize them, but these 3 officers were nominated by their sergeant, Tom Weber. And I'll read the award they're receiving here. Patrolman Egbert, Patrolman Koch, your letters will be the same. Chris, yours just a hair different. Patrolman Egbert, on May 1st, 2020, at approximately 11:20 p.m., you and Officers Hartzler and Koch responded to 659 Pittsburgh Avenue for a disturbed female who had admitted to a crisis worker that she cut herself. According to the report, when you arrived at the scene, Patrolman Koch observed a woman lying on the couch with blood coming from her arm. You immediately forced entry to the residence, placed a tourniquet on the woman's arm to stop the bleeding. You also called EMS to come to the scene and saw that the woman got transported to the hospital for treatment. Had you not all acted in such an expeditious fashion, the victim would most have likely succumbed to her wounds. Based on the nomination submitted to me by Sergeant Weber outlining the actions of you and your fellow officers at this incident, you're to be commended for your quick thinking and decisive response. Your actions are keeping in the highest traditions of law enforcement and the Worcester Police Department, and it's with great pleasure that I award you the Worcester Police Department's Life-Saving Award. Congratulations. I've been forwarded a letter from Sergeant Weber, as well as a voicemail from Mayor Brenneman, regarding your participation in an event that occurred on July 2nd, 2020, in which a young autistic boy was threatening suicide by suffocation. You clearly went above and beyond the call of duty by comforting this boy, calming him down, and showing empathy towards him during his time of crisis. You went even further and personally drove the boy to Worcester Community Hospital, where you stayed with him until his mother arrived. Your empathy and compassion towards this young man are exactly what we hope every officer would display in a similar situation. While you may not be a seasoned veteran, you have clearly set a great example for everyone to follow. And based on the recommendations of both Sergeant Weber and Captain Nadoma, I'm awarding you the Worcester Police Department's Award of Merit. Quote, the Award of Merit may be awarded to any officer of the Worcester Police Department for an outstanding act or achievement that brings credit to the Worcester Police Department. It involves performance above and beyond that required by the employee's basic work assignment or exceptional professional skill and conduct during a coordinated action. This award may also be awarded to any Worcester police officer for exceptional investigative work that brings credit to the department. You represented the Worcester Police Department and yourself in the finest fashion, and your actions are in keeping in the highest traditions of law enforcement and the Worcester Police Department. Thank you for your continued efforts, and keep up the good work. Okay? Now mask up and I'll give this to you.
Basically, my 16-year-old autistic son tried to take his life, and 3 police officers arrived before we did. And I believe one of the officers' names was Coach, or K-O-C-H, and the other 2 officers I don't know offhand, but they were so wonderful. I was spazzing out. They were very, very good. They handled situations very well. You know, we had like a miniature, it's called a pocket bully pit bull, and they were playing with her and calming my son down. And he, ironically, we just taught him his address the week before, and we were talking about 911, so this came into play. But the Mr. Patrolman Coach, K-O-C-H, went with him to the hospital, was joking with them, and brought kind to ease. I can't even find the words right now to express how grateful I am for them. Both my brothers were police officers in other cities, and so I know that some can be rough around the edges. The fact that these 3 were just amazing with us and did not go until kind was well taken care of and at ease. I was so impressed with their training, the way they handle everything, their compassion, their empathy. Like I said, even, driving him to the hospital, making sure he's okay before he left, and they just went way out of their way, and I cannot thank them enough for what they did for my son. My son gets out of the hospital today, and I'm just eternally grateful.
All right, there. I think we're back. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay, good deal. It just actually brings tears to your eye. It's first time I heard that. That was a phone call from the mother of the autistic boy that she had left a voice message for me to give that message. And I thought council would appreciate hearing the good things that our police division, as well as all of our divisions, do here in the city. So with that, thank you. We're here to help with any of the subjects on your council agenda tonight. I know there are a lot of weighty subjects, so we wish you well in your deliberations, and we'll help in any way we can. So with that, Mr. Beitendijk, President Beitendijk, it's back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations to the officers. And we have every right to be proud of those that serve the city in no matter what capacity. They always give 100%. I don't think there's any petitions, but this is where I turn to Mr. Scavelli. Communications from the public, sir.
Yes, I'll get to that in just a moment. I don't know that there are any current questions on agenda items. I do want to say that before we get started, that the city did receive the petition on racial justice, which is actually something a lot of the people in the comments are talking about. And we did just want to say that we did review it. There was nothing in the petition itself that asked for specific legislation. Based upon that, it is not an agenda item tonight and there will be no action taken upon it. However, I would be happy to discuss with any of the people who signed it or who wrote it about specific agenda items they would be looking to have in the future and legislation that they would like to see passed. And I would be more than happy to talk with them about their concerns and their ideas. So anyone out there watching, if you would like to contact me, my number can be found on the city's website. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. You can contact me by email. I'm on the chat all night tonight, so if you'd like to talk to me about that then too, we can do that, and we can talk about what legislation you're looking for going forward. I'm going to go ahead and review the comments here and see if we have anything on the agenda itself. Okay, so we have for 2020-41, how can the public trust that these funds will be allocated equitably, especially when one of the council members leads, okay, that's not part of, unfortunately, Ms. Birch, that is not part of what's on the agenda tonight. But the question about 2020-41 is, and that's from Ms. Laura Birch. So let's see, moving on then.
John, can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so annually we have a special audit called a federal audit, and these funds will be audited next year by a private public accounting firm, an independent public accounting firm. So that's how we'll ensure that these are spent properly. Got it?
All right, thank you. I'm looking through this list here. We've got quite a few, but most of them are not on any agenda items. Okay, so we do have a question from Ms. Weber on 2020-34 regarding collective bargaining agreements with the police union. Her question is, what is the rate of the wage increase mentioned on page 37? So if I go to page 37, the wage increase, I can actually answer that off the top of my head. The wage increase currently that's being proposed and is being considered tonight by City Council is a 2.5% increase for both police and fire. Let's see. And then there's a question about the actual attachment there. That is the contract itself. Ms. Weber, that is a public record, so if you're interested, I can get that to you. And then I think right now, let's wait because we do have we have one more. From Michelle Libby, agenda item 2020-41, what specific organizations will be receiving funding from the CARES Act appropriation? Will they be allocated to, it's hard to read this, will they be allocated to, I'm assuming, groups that recognize racial and class disparities in pandemic effects? Is there anyone who wants to take that one?
I'd be happy to. As we discussed in the documentation for council, that is going towards actual purchases, and actually most of that can only be used for purchases for things related to COVID or impacted by COVID. So PPE, equipment, cleaning, those kinds of things. In addition, we are using some of that for some additional subsidy for our transportation program for low to moderate income through community action that were impacted pretty significantly by COVID. And then the remainder of it is for expenses that the city itself has, so not for other organizations. So things like fire and EMS and those kinds of things. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I'll also highlight, this is John Ansel, that is governed by the Section 5001 of the CARES Act that have the categories where funds can be allocated. So there are strict guidelines for allocation and requesting of those funds that are covered in a U.S. CARES Act document. Correct, Joel?
That is correct, John. And then additional guidance that was related to that from the State Office of Budget Management as well.
We have two more questions right now. The one is another one from Desiree Weber. She says on the same item, how does this potential agreement extension intersect with possible changes in policing policy? Does this extension lock into place police policy or only compensation? Ms. Weber, I can answer that one for you. This is an extension of the current agreements. That is not part of policy, actual police policy. The parts of the collective bargaining agreement that were there previously will stay the same. The only change will be compensation. Let's see, Ms. Birch, let's see if anything new here. She's talking about what the guidelines are for the CARES Act, and she's suggesting that it can be used for homeless, unemployed, and food insecure. I don't know if that's a question. So Ms. Birch, I will be happy, unless there's someone who wants to address that, Ms. Birch, I will be happy to talk with you about that if you would like to give me a call tomorrow. And then Ms. Libby says on 2020-41, what about equipment for organizations providing housing, medical care, etc. to low-income members of the community? For example, 180 and the Startsman Clinic. Is there anybody who wants to answer that?
I would only say that we're already, we've already allocated some grant money that was through CDBG that was available because of CARES Act funds towards the day center, the living room project, and which is being managed by both the Salvation Army and 180 are participating in that project. So we are doing that. And as I said, we're also giving money to support our transportation program, which is for low to moderate income as well.
Mr. Montgomery, this is probably another question for you from Ms. Weber. How and by whom, by what process are the priorities of the CARES Act funding determined? Is the public able to participate in these decisions? And if so, why not? And if not, I assume she wants to say, if not, why not?
I would say, like as Councilman Ansel mentioned, there's already a statute that dictates most of that and what it can be used for. It is fairly limited. And as I said, we've already been in contact with the Salvation Army, 180, Community Action, and have funds going towards those. But even those entities have to prove that the funds they would need are directly related to COVID or impacts of COVID. And the requirements are fairly strict, so it's very limited.
All right. Everyone, we're going to wait about 15 seconds to see if any more comments come through. If they do not, we will end the public comments section for this evening. Anyone who still would like to address council can write, and I will respond. One other question is, how do you set priorities? I do believe, Mr. Montgomery, you answered that, which is basically that it's set by statute. Based upon that, we're going to go ahead and close the public comment section. Like I said, anyone who did not get a question answered can still type them in. I will respond to you as best I can. and we can always address those issues at a later time as well. And so I'll turn it back over to Mr. Beitendijk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scavelli. That brings us to committee reports, which I don't think we had any in the last 6 weeks, or at least none I was aware of. But we do have a public hearing tonight on the designated outdoor refreshment area, or all the acronym being DORA, but it's not an Explorer. So Mr. Sanders will be chairing that, and I turn the floor and the meeting over to you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Beitendijk. I will call the public hearing related to the downtown outdoor refreshment area to order. What this is, it's an area where the Ohio Liquor Control open carry restrictions do not apply at particular hours, and adults are permitted to possess and consume alcohol in public with certain restrictions. And at this point, I will open this up to those that wish to speak for this potential outdoor refreshment area. State your name and proceed.
This is Shannon Waller with Main Street Worcester. If I might just throw in the opening discussion, this is a topic that has been really the focus for Heritage Ohio and all of my sister Main Street organizations in Ohio, because it's one way that restaurants can increase the footprint of where they can serve meals, where they can serve drinks. And it's truly a tool that will help make the difference between survival and maybe not surviving for a business model that's really been turned on its head by COVID-19. And so of the other Main Street organizations in Ohio, we've all been networking, trying to help each other get these laws passed, because it seems like the most within reach tool that we can use to help these businesses survive. And I can tell you that this law has been around for about 5 years in its current state. It's not bleeding edge technology as far as seeing how this is going to impact the community. It's been very successful in other communities. And they're mostly smaller communities. Ones that have recently passed DORAs are Tiffin, Kent, Lebanon, and the Executive Director of Main Street Lebanon, Linda Nabelar, says that one of her restaurants, as soon as they passed DORA on 6/12, had the single biggest business days in their entire 9-year history of their restaurant business. Now, it was probably good weather and people coming out to play too, but that's a kind of anecdote that I don't think we can ignore. And if we don't pass this, there are going to be a lot of communities that have something we don't, and we would be at a competitive disadvantage. So I urge council to pass it, and to pass it quickly. Our restaurants are bleeding money every day, and this will help staunch the flow.
This is Scott Myers.
Thank you.
Mr. Starling, would I assume by the thumbs up that the chamber supports this initiative?
Yeah, and I see that Mike Mariola was getting ready to chime in. This was actually brought to us. I know that Main Street has watched this for quite some time, but a partnership between Main Street and the chamber and the application, yes, Councilman Myers, and then also led on a restaurateur end by Mike Mariola. And I think, Mike, you were going to say something.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you, Shannon, for introducing some of the reasoning behind us trying to get this DORA put together. This is certainly a challenging time for the restaurants, and anything that we can do, anything that the city council can do to help restaurants and other small businesses, we certainly encourage right now, for all the reasons that Shannon mentioned. And additionally, I think there is a long-term benefit to putting the DORA in place. I think that it's going to help long-term with tourism in the downtown and just give visitors and regulars a new way to use the downtown. I think that there are going to be some tie-ins to events that we can do downtown, and it just gives us an opportunity to serve guests in a different way. So there's certainly an immediate need, and I would echo what Shannon said, which is that the sooner that City Council can act, the better for the restaurants, because we all know we have a limited window in Ohio where we can be doing things outside. But I also encourage everyone on the council to consider the long-term positive benefit for the downtown and the businesses. And I think it's going to be something that really enhances our downtown and all the wonderful work that has been done already. So thank you for your consideration. And on behalf of the restaurants, I'm certainly available along with Glenn to answer any questions for the businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Mariola. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak for this proposal? Is there anyone here to speak against the proposal? I did have a question I had shared with Mr. Scavelli earlier, and at this point, one of the concerns that I have is we have actually Mr. Myers has been kind enough to provide a map of the as his background. And one of the questions I have is, what is with these areas as they've been instituted, since, as you stated, Ms. Waller, that this is potentially has been around for 5 years, what's the addition that's been required for areas that have done this for this 5-year period?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You broke up a little bit, sir. Just the question. I missed the last part of your question.
For the areas that have for the last 5 years, what additional policing has been required with the fact that you've got open container within a certain area?
It depends on the size of the community. For an area like Canton, and I'm going off of my memory, I think they had 2 additional patrol on foot plus an additional car that was stationed within the Dora area. For smaller communities that are roughly equivalent to ours, they really didn't have to add any personnel. They were able to manage it with their existing force.
Chief Fisher, I have a question for you. Looking at the area here, I mean, I know that the proposal is that there would be 1 additional officer utilized on this, but my question is, I mean, looking at that distance to travel, I mean, is that a realistic number of 1 being able to properly control this area, considering is spread out as it is?
Well, Mr. Sanders, you'd have 1. Of course, you also have the entire rest of the shift that's working. So if it's something where 1 officer couldn't handle it, let's say you had a group of 6 or 8 people, for example, getting out of control or something like that, then it's as simple as getting on the radio and say, hey, I need some assistance down here, get additional officers, deal with it. But we've had some discussions, and we're cautiously optimistic that hopefully won't be an issue.
Thank you, Chief Fisher. Is there anyone else that wishes to address this item as a public hearing?
Mr. Sanders, this is Scott Myers. This would be for Glenn and Michael, perhaps for Sharon Waller. Would the beverages need to be required to be purchased from one of the local restaurants? I mean, is there going to be a special, instead of like a red Solo cup, which everybody can buy thousands of, would there be a special container that we could identify as they're customers of our downtown, or can people just kind of bring their cooler in their car and walk around downtown with a cup of alcohol?
Mike, do you want to take that, or should I?
Yep, I could try to answer. That's a great question. And the way that the Dora works is it has to the beverage has to be sold by a licensed retailer in the district, and those retailers are all listed on the application. and it does have to be in a special cup. So right now what we're working on is Main Street and the Chamber are working on supplying those cups and selling them to the restaurants and bars that are participating. And then the guests can only buy in that cup if they want to take it out of the establishment. And they can't take it into another establishment, another restaurant or bar. They have to finish it and dispose of the cup. And they can go into other retailers so long as the retailers approve that they're allowed to come in. So you cannot open a container that you brought from home. You can't bring a cooler into the downtown. It's a very specific use, and it has to be in that cup. And I think what we're proposing is that we will have the bartenders, servers writing the date on the cup. That way, in the event that Chief Fisher or his force needs to check on something, that they can validate when that cup was served.
I have a question, please.
Good answer. Thank you.
This is Jen Warden. I have a question regarding the cups. I understand that they're recyclable. Will the city be putting out permanent recycle bins like nearby or alongside of our trash cans to accommodate the hopefully increased volume of recyclable cups that will be downtown?
I can answer that. We already have quite a few downtown, the double, where they have both recycle and trash there. And we have some extra ones in storage right now if we need to, that we can pull out both of recycle and trash cans. And hopefully that would cover any needs downtown.
Thank you.
I have a question if I could. I read the legislation for it, but I see they have hours of operation and through Monday through Friday and then from Saturday to Sunday. But I didn't see anything. Is this going to be 365 days a year, or can we limit it to just say late spring and summer and early fall, or are we going to have a patrolman downtown in the middle of January for this? That's, I guess, can we limit it? I didn't see anything there that limited it to what month, what season of the year. So I can't imagine in January it's going to be a huge hit. But is this going to be year round?
The request in the application, Mr. Costanza, is that it would be year-round. And then the idea of it being on Sunday, because a number of restaurants now are offering brunch as well. So we're trying to be responsive to what the restaurateurs had suggested. And yes, it would be year-round at this point. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the legislation and this overall, the DORA, it is required that it is reviewed by City Council. I believe it's every 2 or 3 years. So, you know, just as this goes along, I'm sure if there's things that need to shift, definitely open to having those conversations.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the police department would be, they would keep the cost down a bit. I just don't see it being used perhaps that much in the midwinter. And are we still going to be required to have a patrolman downtown in, say, January, December, February?
Well, Mr. Bostancic, we'll have an officer, quote unquote, downtown regardless, because that's part of the way the city split into patrol zones.
Okay.
So we'll have an officer patrolling that zone regardless of the DORA, just as part of their routine responsibilities.
Okay. Okay.
Just to clarify on Mr. Starlin's comment, I thought I remembered seeing this. It's actually 5 years from the effective date, and then every 5 years thereafter, council has the right to review.
Well, this is Scott Myers, and I do realize that 5-year provision was in there, but just as we're doing right now, we do write the laws, and if we wanted to change this law next year, we certainly can.
And to that point, I assume that there will be hopefully new restaurants that will be added to downtown as it continues to thrive. And I'm sure that they would have continued interest in that, which would be a request to City Council to expand them and include them in the DORA moving forward.
I've tried not to say things in this part of the council meeting because this is for the community input and wondering about this. As far as this proposal in front of the group, the restaurant formed a committee that came and met with the administrative team here about a month and a half ago, I guess. And we have talked this over internally. We've talked it over with our police division. We've talked it over with the merchants and Main Street. And really, I think this is something that could be a positive for Worcester. Sure, there's always possible pitfalls, but I don't foresee too many with this. I think it's truly worth a try, and if we have problems come up, we'll address them. But I think it really could help our downtown, and is worth a try. But we'll answer any questions council has when the legislation is in front of them. All right, thank you.
Well, if there's no further,
I think Justin has a
community, we can take the council members, we can take the conversation up with this when we discuss the legislation. What did you have, Mr. Bostancic?
Oh, I thought Justin was trying to chime in.
And Mr. Sanders, real quick, just to piggyback off the mayor's comments, yes, we had almost 800 people complete a survey on their thoughts on the DORA, and we were pushing 90% positive rates, and that's community stakeholders. When we said residents downtown, and then also merchants, we were at 90% saying, hey, we like the idea of adding the DORA to downtown. Just wanted to add that on. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, well, if there's no further public comment, we'll close this public hearing. Thank you.
All right, the designated outdoor refreshment area has had the public hearing that was required. Thank you, Mr. Sanders, for chairing it, and thank all of those who commented about it. We have no unfinished business, so we're going to item 7, new business. And the first reading is for resolution number 2020-37. It is going to be presented by Mr. Bostancic. It is budgeted, so no suspension of the rules or 3 readings would be required. Before I turn to you, Mr. Bostancic, I will have Ms. DiPaolo please read the title.
Resolution number 2020-37. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise according to law and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the construction of curb ramps and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bostancic, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is rather simple. It is for the construction of curb ramps for a paving project in 2021 along Old Mansfield Road, West Bowman Street, and Grant Street. And these curb ramps, or the reason we need this now is that these curb ramps are a requirement of accepting the city's large city money from ODOT. So this is something that we require before we can get that kind of money from them. So it's $65,000 coming out of the capital fund, and that's pretty much it on this one. I think Roger might be on the line if there's any questions, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Roger's here.
Okay, thanks, Roger. If there are no questions, I would like to make a motion to accept this.
Okay, motion to adopt by Mr. Bostancic. Is there a second?
David Silvestri, second.
Seconded by Mr. Silvestri. Any other comments? Roger, you have anything? Anyone want to add?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, I'm good too. So would you please call the roll, Ms. DiPaolo?
Ansel,
Yes.
Warden,
Sorry, yes.
okay. Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
and Bostancic.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2020-37 passes. We'll be looking now at resolution number 2020-38. It will be presented by Mr. Bostancic. It is slated for 3 readings. So once again, Mr. Paulo, would you please read the title before I turn it back over to Mr. Bostancic?
Resolution number 2020-38, a resolution authorizing the mayor to submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, to accept and apply such funds if awarded, and to execute any necessary documents in connection therewith, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Bidendyke, I can't hear you.
There we go.
Okay.
Fat fingers. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Again, this is a fairly simple one. This is just a request for the city of Worcester to authorize, we're giving authorization to apply for and accept grant money from the Ohio Public Works Commission, and this is for the reconstruction of Melrose Drive. This is going to be a 2022 project. This is a fairly large project. Its total funds estimated at $3 million, and if we are granted the funds from the Ohio Public Works Commission, it would be roughly about $500,000. So it'd be a good portion would be paid for by them. This Melrose Drive reconstruction is going to happen from Milltown Road to Smithfield Western Road. And it's pretty much entire reconstruction. Reconstruct Melrose Drive. I'm going to just read right off my cheat sheet here. We'll reconstruct Melrose Drive, eliminating ditches on both sides of the road. The project will add a 10-foot multi-use path on the west side and standard sidewalk on the east side. Be new pavement, new gutters, new curbs, storm sewer and water line, and sanitary sewer and sidewalks. But again, this is just for the application to apply for and accept grant money. But that just gives you an idea what it's for. But and again, not until 2022. That's all I have right now. Any questions?
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
Will the multi-use path that is included in this project eventually tie into the city's bike path?
Yes. That's the plan. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Roger, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just that Melrose is the next road on the our capital infrastructure plan to get reconstructed, and like I said, it's a 2022 project, and we're just trying to get everything started. That's all.
Mr. Bostancic, I know it's not open for official discussion, but since the multi-use path was mentioned, I did just have one question, if I can ask it now, and that is, when I look at that area, I didn't know if there was any thought that went into which is on what side of the street. In other words, what goes on the east side and what goes on the west side. I guess I would submit that because of some of the current properties that are just fields, it seems like there's more open fields on the east side, and then on the west side there's a more residences. I would submit that maybe we should look seriously at those two and consider switching them, because in my humble opinion, the multi-use path would go better on the east side with all those open fields, and the sidewalk would be better suited on the residential side. But again, that's just my opinion, and I would defer to the administration to see if anyone has thought of that concern.
Roger, do we have a thought on which side of the road is it going to be on?
Well, currently the multi-use path is on the west side of Melrose, which stops at Wedgewood Way.
Okay.
Phase 3 of our plan is to continue that to Milltown, and then run a trail on the north side of Milltown up to Friendsville Road. So this would just tie into that without crossing the Milltown, or without crossing Melrose.
But you're going on the north side of Milltown?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we applied for last year. We didn't get the funding, but we'll be applying again.
Okay, even though on the north side of Milltown, it would wrap right around if you switched sides of the street, but is that against our policy to switch sides of the street halfway down or at an intersection?
Well, we have
such
to
as-
go, well, it's easier for bikers if you limit how many times you cross the street.
Okay.
So basically a safety issue.
Understood. But to the point of the person going a different direction, if they're going on Milltown heading east and they happen to want to turn left on Melrose, they would have to cross the street under the current placement, and they would
Well,
not have to.
let's get the application in and we'll take a look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I would make a motion for adoption.
Okay, Mr. Bostancic moves to adopt. Well, actually, I think you have to suspend the rules first.
Oh, okay. I make a motion to suspend the rules and put this on third and final.
All right, motion by Mr. Bostancic to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second by Mr. Silvestri.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Heard him first. Plus, he talked the most about this, so it's only right. So, would you please call the motion on the suspension of the rules, Mr. Palmer?
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended. I turn to you again, Mr. Bostancic.
And motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Bostancic. Is there a second? Where's our
Second.
biker, Mr. Myers?
Second.
All right, second by Mr. Myers. Any further discussion? I think plan details can be discussed further down the road. Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-38 passes. Now we look at ordinance number 2020-29. It'll be presented by Mr. Sanders, and it relates to the designated outdoor refreshment area we had the public hearing on. Before I get back to you, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Paula, would you please please read the title?
Ordinance number 2020-29. An ordinance approving an application for a designated outdoor refreshment area and establishing a designated outdoor refreshment area in the city of Worcester, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours. And as I didn't note, but it is slated for 3 readings.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we discussed at the public hearing, it's like I say, we're looking to this designated outdoor refreshment area in our downtown area. For all council members, you got Exhibit B, which at that point shows the extent of the areas that this would include. I guess at this point, I'll open this up to any questions from any council members, any additional questions from council members related to this. I have a question for Mr. Scavelli. This says 5 years from the effective date of this ordinance, and every 5 years thereafter, we shall have a review. Is there potential that we can change that time frame?
That time frame is statutory. So that is from the Ohio Revised Code. So we would stay with that time frame.
Unless we would find that at this point it would become problematic and then rescind the ordinance?
Which we could always do, yes. It's just that it's built in there so that every 5 years you take a look at it to make sure it's still working. but we could always rescind the ordinance, as you say.
Okay. Well, with that, I would motion to suspend the rules of council and place ordinance 2020-29 on third and final reading.
I'd second.
Mr. Beidendijk, I believe you are muted. I believe you are still muted.
There we go. I love my tablet. It has worked so well for me. Actually, Mr. Paulo did get it running real well. Now, if I could only have skinnier fingers, I can't hit that darn unmute button. So anyways, Mr. Sanders moved to suspend the rules. I think Mr. Ansel
correct
seconded it. Would you please call the roll on the suspension of the rules?
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
and Ansel.
Yes.
And the rules are suspended. Is there another motion you have, Mr. Sanders?
I would motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sanders. Is there a second?
Seconded by Mr. Myers.
Okay, second by Mr. Myers. I'd just like to have one comment. You know, I hope it passes because I really like to see that from time to time, even if it isn't a special event, or though it'd be like a special event, that some of these streets we could close off just to allow the restaurants to expand their area to serve patrons or have patrons sit out with their meals. You know, I think it would be really neat to be able to set up portable tables actually in the roadway, you know, on weekends or evenings. So that's my take on it. Well, that was a real conversation killer. So seeing there's nothing further, I would have Mr. Paulo call the roll on the motion to adopt.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
and Ansel.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Ordinance number 2020-29 passes. I hope this works for the restaurateurs who have hung in there so gallantly. So good luck to you all. That brings us to Resolution 2020-39. It will be presented by Mr. Ansel. It is a budgeted item. Before I get to you, Mr. Ansel, I will ask Mr. Paulo to please read the title.
Resolution number 2020-39. A resolution authorizing the Director of Finance to issue payment for services rendered prior to the fiscal officer's certification of availability of funds and declaring an emergency.
All right, Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours. I do note it's budgeted.
Thank you,
Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very straightforward ORC, Ohio Revised Code compliance matter, whereas any expenditure must have a fiscal officer's certificate of funds available prior to purchase. Well, in this case, we had an emergency purchase, a service, and weld a new auger on our equipment at the water pollution control plant. Ohio Revised Code permits certification up to $3,000. It's called a then and now certificate. Well, this exceeded that, so it requires council approval. The expenditure amount was $3,345. So this money is already budgeted, and we're just authorizing payment of that emergency expense. And that being noted, I would motion to adopt Resolution 2020-39.
Second.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel and a second by Ms. Warden. Any other comments or questions? It's pretty routine. Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt, Mr. Paulo? Or not to adopt you, but to adopt the ordinance.
Well, if anybody wants to adopt me, I wouldn't mind, but, you know, you can never have too many parents. Anyway, Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
and Bostancic.
Yes.
All right, resolution number 2030 or 2020-39 passes. We'll be looking at resolution number 2020-41. It'll be presented by Mr. Ansel. It is slated for 3 readings. But if you would, Mr. Paulo, please read the title of this resolution.
Resolution number 2020-41, a resolution appropriating the funds received from the County Coronavirus Relief Distribution Fund, amending the annual appropriation ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we're really fortunate to have this resolution before us because it appropriates the CARES Act money that Council passed Resolution 2020-36 to receive our requested portion of funding from the county. As you were aware, the county received the lump sum distribution, and then we had to initiate our request for allocation, of which we've already completed that process. And in hindsight, the original resolution probably could have been amended with the words "and hereby appropriated." So this is more of a clarification of the process. But in any event, this just enables the city to legally disperse the funds in accordance to the CARES Act as described in the legalistic terms, 42 USC 801 parens D, and all the applicable regulations before receiving said funds. So this is one of the things that the administration has to verify the allocations in each of the categories specifically defined, and I would welcome the public to request those definitions because it has to be allocated according to the guidelines, then documented before the final distribution or transfer of funds are made. As a matter of fact, we have $794,739 in our funding pool, and we have to justify any of the reimbursements made from that pool. And quite frankly, we might not receive full funding allocation based on the requirements of that application process. Hopefully we get the bulk of that because we have some very important areas of funding: the EMS personnel costs, the bulk waste collection, the ongoing disinfection and chemicals, software upgrades, and then the transportation program subsidies that were, very much in demand during the crisis and still are today. So I commend the administration for their proactive documentation process and look forward to hearing the report on what our final request tally was for this potentially $750,000 of reimbursement from the state and the Fed. So timing is of the essence on this, and since we're looking for a disbursement of fund reserves, I would motion to suspend the rules and move resolution 2020-41 to third and final reading this evening.
Okay, motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Ansel. It was seconded by Mr. Bostancic. Mr. Paulo, would you call the roll on the motion to suspend the rule?
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
and Myers.
Yes.
The rules
Motion to
are,
adopt.
yeah, the rules are suspended and Mr. Ansel has moved to adopt. Is there a second?
Second, Scott Myers.
Second by Mr. Myers. Any further comments, questions? It's always nice to get reimbursed for mandates that were required by no cause of our own doing, and it's been expensive for municipalities to try to adapt to the needs that have been generated by this COVID-19.
Mr. Bidendyke or Mr. Ansel, just one comment.
Yes.
We had previously had some legislation regarding some cleaning and some things for an ambulance and some different types of equipment for disinfecting. And I know that there were some that I believe at the time, Chief talked about that there was some possible grant money available for some of that cleaning apparatus. If these funds could be used for those kinds of things, perhaps we should look into that expenditure to go ahead and get those. I know there's a portable aerosolized unit that they have at some of the other healthcare facilities, like up in Hudson. We might want to look at that. That could be used for our police cruisers, as well as our ambulances and fire equipment.
If I could just comment that, oh, go ahead, Joel, if you were going to respond to Mr. Myers.
We purchased some of that, and we have others that we are purchasing, and that we will absolutely be trying to get reimbursed for those purchases when we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That's great. Thank you.
And I just wanted to respond. I've been reading some of the comments from the public on the Facebook feed. I know Mr. Scavelli's been sharing those with us. And I believe all of us council members have also just very recently received an email from Laura Birch regarding this very issue. In case you feel that you are not being heard or you're not being recognized, I do receive your emails and I have read this. I do believe that the city is appropriating the funding as it is intended. And you're right in sharing what the Treasury Department lists as options. It doesn't say that you have to use it for A, B, C, D, and E, but these are the things that are acceptable. And the city is going to use those dollars with that in mind.
Anyone else? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt the resolution?
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
and Myers.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2020-41 passes. The next ordinance that's up for consideration is 2020-31. It'll be presented by Mr. Sanders. It's slated for 3 readings. If you would please, Mr. Paulo, please read the title.
Ordinance number 2020-31. An ordinance amending Chapter 351, parking generally, of the codified ordinances of the City of Worcester, Ohio, by adopting a prohibition against parking or abandoning upon any street a recreation or commercial vehicle.
All right, Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, evidently, this has become a greater issue within our community regarding the parking, more specifically of recreational vehicles, such as campers, motorhomes, trailers, and watercraft that have found their way to where they seem to be getting parked and then they're not moving for extended periods of time. The commercial vehicle portion of this, I'm not sure that this is necessarily that big of an issue, but to the point, if we're going to do this, we might as well include them as well, because again, it becomes problematic if you've got a 53-foot semi-trailer and tractor sitting in any of our side streets. It's just it's a nuisance for the neighbors. Not to mention the fact that the length of the total unit is going to exceed the width of most of the city lots in most of our areas. So I myself have some level of skepticism that this is, as I called it, an RV Armageddon going on in our community. But at this point, I would be willing to have someone, have the rest of council chime in on this and with their thoughts and concerns regarding this topic.
This is Jennifer Warden. I've had several complaints over the past couple of years, particularly on the President Streets over here, regarding some campers and camper vans and the like that have been parked for very long periods of time in front of different residences. And so I am aware that this is a problem that members of our community have been dealing with.
This is Scott Myers. It does seem interesting, though, that it also specifically lists canoes, that you can't leave your canoe on the street.
Shoot, I have to put it back in the garage.
Yeah. My understanding is you can also not park your motor home in your driveway. Is that correct?
I would need to go back and review that, Mr. Myers. Give me one moment.
I will say, if I could chime in, I've looked at that before. I know Andrew Dutton's here too. He could probably speak to it better than I, but I can say that if it is beyond the front line of the home, it can't be in the front. It's got to be on the side of the back. Is that right, Mr. Dutton?
Mr. Sylvester, yes, that's correct. It needs to be in the side yard or the rear yard and on a hard surface. You can have a camper or a boat or something on nature in the front driveway for up to 72 hours for loading or unloading.
Right, and I will say that seems pretty severe to a lot of residents that I have talked to, so I will voice the same concern with Mr. Sanders. But what that I think is aimed at doing is trying to keep our community looking nice and looking welcoming, and keeping even something as simple as a small trailer to the side yard or the backyard. There are certain extenuating circumstances where it's difficult for residents to follow that. So I think it's a pretty, it's a law, it's a portion of our code that maybe we should look at a little closer. So I will say that I would be willing to review that as Mr. Sanders has voiced. On another note, when I really read through what's being proposed here, I can't help but say I'm in support of it. I know there's also times when I have come upon a dumpster, a black dumpster late at night, not marked with any reflective material, that is really unsafe, and to have that on a city street, and I've seen those parked for days on end. So I would ask maybe Andrew Dutton to take a look at that. To me, that's a serious safety issue. I saw the picture of the loaded up trailer as well. And, maybe even some of these hauling companies, I mean, I understand it for aesthetic reasons. Their colors may be black and some other color, but to have a black dumpster late at night not marked with any reflective material is a serious hazard that maybe our code should address.
That just makes money for attorneys.
Again, like I said, I think I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow dumpsters to be on a street to me, dumpsters should be on a street for 72 hours, and I'd rather see campers or other things under certain circumstances be allowed, in the front yard. So that's just my opinion. Anyway, I didn't know if Mr. Dutton wanted to speak to maybe why something like dumpsters was not included in this ordinance.
Well, are you making an amendment?
I'm just asking the question. I may consider making an amendment, but I'm asking the question.
Yeah, my guess is Mr. Sanders will leave this on first reading.
And if I could answer that, this ordinance deals with, vehicles that are generally allowed to be on the street, boats on trailers, motorhomes, commercial vehicles. So these are all things that have, licenses that can be parked on the street or, with a vehicle. You get into things like dumpsters or garbage or something like that. I think you might get another part of ordinances about, obstructing the right of way just in general.
I understand, Mr. Dutton, but the particular picture that was provided in the supporting documentation for this ordinance was, to me, that's the same function as a dumpster. that's why I was asking. So thank you.
If I could add something just real quick, the camper in the yard, that's covered under the zoning ordinances, which we updated a couple years ago, I think. So if we wanted to look into that, that would be something that the planning commission, would go through planning commission first, and then any recommendations from them would come to city council. So that's a different part of the code. This is the parking specifically ordinance. And what I would ask is, I'm pretty certain, it's under section 311 is where it talks about other obstacles in the street. So, my suggestion would be there's probably another spot for another obstacle, like a dumpster that doesn't have wheels or isn't on a trailer.
Okay.
That we would look, if we need to tighten something up, we would do it in chapter 311. It talks about street obstructions, and I will absolutely take a look at that and see what's covered, whether that's something we need to adjust the ordinance or whether that's just an enforcement issue that we need.
Well, it might be we need to add that it has to have reflective material so that it isn't a unseen hazard at night. So, it might be a mandate that, because sometimes where construction needs to be done, and especially downtown. In fact, there's a building right next to where I rent office space, had a dumpster out front on Liberty Street that, and I could understand why they had it, but, and they seemed to do it right. They had construction tape, and I think this did have reflectors on it, but we should look at, to make it as safe as possible if they have to put it out because of the necessity. And I also should point out, even though I'm old, my memory isn't so bad as I remember a certain individual who was camping out in a quasi RV up there in the northwestern area that, plagued us for a number of years. So I should point that out. This might prevent circumstances like that too.
Well, to your point, Mr. Bytendijk, I would have thought that we would have brought this forward then more so than almost a decade later. But at this point, yes, I plan to leave this on first reading this evening. We'll get some more, any additional public comment, and we'll revisit this in 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll move it forward at that point in time.
Mr. Sanders? Mr. Sanders, two things. I mean, the passage of this would effectively say if you have an RV or a motorhome or a boat that you're going to have to pay to store it someplace, because you can't have it on front of your house or on your property. The question I would have, it was referenced in one of the material memos, I think in support, was that other communities have similar ordinances. If we could, for our next meeting, have a kind of an idea what other communities, and Ashland, Medina, those kind of places, do they have similar legislation in place? Thank you.
All right, we'll consider ordinance number 2020-31 as having its first reading. Looking at ordinance 2020-32 will be again presented by Mr. Sanders. It is scheduled for 3 readings. Before we get back to you, Mr. Sanders, I turn to Ms. DiPaolo and ask her if she would please read the title.
Ordinance number 2020-32, an ordinance amending Chapter 539, Park Regulations of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Worcester, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
All right, Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Mr. President. A reoccurring theme this evening, permitting people to drink alcohol. And this, it's now in the potential, the request is within the Freelander Chalet. And what we would be doing with that is there would have to be a permit that would be granted by either the Director of Administration or their designee that would allow for beer, wine, and other alcoholic beverages to be served and consumed inside the chalet only. No alcoholic, none of the beverages would be allowed outside. And then there would be violations, terms and conditions for permit authorized, and or any violation of any state statute regarding the possession or consumption of alcohol. This request has been brought to us by the by Parks, by the Recreation Department. And I guess my one question I would have to Mr. Baddick, if he's still here, yes he is, would be, is this going to help us rent this space more easily, or is this just the request because we can't ask it?
Yes, Mr. Sanders. It will help us rent this space for events such as weddings, other events similar to that. I look, if we allow alcohol inside the chalet, that we'll see a definite uptick in reservations. And we spent quite a bit of taxpayer money to get this facility on par with any facility in Wayne County. And I think it would serve our community well if we allowed alcohol in the chalet.
Well, along those lines, then, you know, again, we've spent money to create a property that at this point is going to compete with other businesses that are actually for profit to provide those services. So seemingly in other previous legislations that we've had over the last few months, there seems to be some great discourse regarding competing with existing businesses. So my question to the administration is, you know, what justification do we have that we're going to step on other businesses out there in terms of asking for this request?
Well, if you look at the size of the chalet, Mr. Sanders, it's not going to compete with some of your larger venues. I mean, it's a small to medium-sized venue, and it's very affordable for people that can't afford a larger, more expensive venue. So we have a niche, and I don't think we're going to be stepping on other businesses' dollars. I think it's actually going to enhance our community and give people another option.
Well, the occupancy is what, 200 persons?
Actually, I think it's 193.
Okay, so we're going to argue over 7.
Yeah, about 200.
So, I mean, we know that Greenbrier, you can break down, or not Greenbrier, but Greystone, you can break that down into one of their smaller sections, which at this point is going to have a similar occupancy rating as the, so again, we are going to compete against other potential businesses with this space.
Mr. Sanders, if I could make a comment. I guess I still see it as, you know, it's still a decision whether I want to go to a for-profit enterprise or I want to go to a park. And I see this as a park-based facility. It's not like we have City of Worcester workers catering somebody's wedding. You know, it's a pretty do-it-yourself venue. So I think to Mr. Baddick's point, I don't see this as competing. I mean, it's a space, and all we're doing is saying that you're allowed to bring your alcohol. And while I had serious concerns about that, as I did with the Dora, and I didn't take the time to address those, but I guess while we're on the subject, I just want to thank our chief of police for answering my questions, because at a time when, you know, at a time when our society and our, you know, the peace that we enjoy in as citizens seems to be under attack in some larger cities and some volatile areas of the country, it makes me grateful for our city and for all the work that our administration and our law enforcement does here to preserve what we have and our quality of life. So I appreciate him answering my questions. I obviously had some misgivings or some concerns about this, as I did about the Dora, but when I really reviewed all the information and when I talked directly to our police chief, I felt that we addressed these things, and I'm glad that he was brought into the discussions, not only on the Dora, but on this piece of legislation. And I can tell you, because I was copied on an email to the president of council, I don't think he would mind me saying that this was a result of a request for someone who was so ecstatic about the value that we had put into the chalet, has a lot of memories in this community, and was really happy to come and find this as the perfect venue for her wedding. So because of that, because of the personal aspect, it's a do-it-yourself situation, and we're limiting it to the chalet itself, I'm satisfied. I wasn't that satisfied initially, but like I said, with these details in place, I think it's going to be good.
Mr. Sanders, this is Scott Myers. I want to support the chalet and its rental. I think they did a beautiful job. And by the way, a lot of that work was done by our own city staff. I am concerned about the competitive issue, and I think perhaps there's not that many venues in town. We could certainly leave this on first reading and have conversations with people like Spoon Market and others that have similar sized venues available and get their input as to whether they think it would be a competitive situation or not. And my second point is that it'll be really difficult, and I think we'll have to figure out whether we use signage or what we do. Pretty easy if you're standing there having a drink or two to walk out onto that deck and overlook that beautiful pool. We have to be real careful because that's not allowed in this ordinance. They can't do that out there. We'd have kids and families down there. We wouldn't want that. So keeping them inside the building would be something a challenge I think we'll have to make sure we address.
Okay, well, with that, yes, I had planned on leaving this on first reading as well. Again, just to allow public comment, further public comment regarding this. Since this is the first time, I mean, I had just seen this literally when we got our packets. I hadn't even heard any whispers of it. So at this point, I'm good with where we are unless there's any further conversation.
I would like to make one additional comment. We will have a city employee that will be at all our events, so they'll be able to monitor and make sure that everybody's following by the rules.
And is that going to be part of the rental cost then for their time there?
That is correct. We're actually doing that right now. For any event, there is a city employee there. It's a part-time employee, and they assist with any questions, any problems that might arise. They're there to help them out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bitenek, you're muted.
There we go. Resolution number 2020-42 will be presented by Ms. Warden, who wins the award for their longest title tonight. And good for Mrs. DiPaolo to get used to using those pipes since they've been in abeyance for about 6 weeks. So if you would please read the title.
Resolution number 2020-42. A resolution pursuant to section 1724.10A2 of the Ohio Revised Code designating the Wayne County Land Reutilization Corporation as the agency for the reclamation, rehabilitation, and reutilization of vacant, abandoned, tax foreclosed, and other real property in the county, directing the corporation to act on behalf of and in cooperation with the City of Worcester in exercising the powers and performing the duties of the City of Worcester under Chapter 5722 of the Ohio Revised Code, directing the preparation of an agreement and plan in furtherance of these matters and authorizing related matters and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. DiPaolo. Ms. Warden, the floor is yours, and I do note it is slated for 3 readings.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. DiPaolo, because that is definitely a mouthful. So Wayne County is establishing a land reutilization corporation, more commonly known as a land bank, and is seeking participation from the city of Worcester. This entity is known as the Wayne County Land Reutilization Corporation and would effectively act on behalf of the city with respect to land and real property reutilization. The board of directors for this corporation will be established in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code and will be composed of 2 county commissioners, the county treasurer, a representative from each of the cities of Worcester, Orville, and Rittman, and president of the Wayne County Township Trustees. I understand that in a meeting earlier today, Mayor Brenneman appointed Andrew Dutton, city planner, as Worcester's representative, pending council's passage of this resolution, with the mayor himself as the alternate. There are currently 55 other counties throughout the state of Ohio who have established land banks such as this. Under section 1724.10 of the Ohio Revised Code, county land banks have the power to acquire, hold, manage, sell, and transfer property, as well as facilitate code enforcement, nuisance abatement, demolition, and the ability to waive tax liens on delinquent properties. Also under this section of the ORC, such a corporation is entitled to incur debt, mortgage property, and issue obligations for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, and improving properties for future lease or sale. The purpose of this corporation is to reclaim and reutilize vacant, delinquent, abandoned, tax foreclosed, or otherwise non-productive land or real property in the county as defined under Chapter 5722 of the Ohio Revised Code. Reutilization goals include limiting blight, enhancing the tax base, rehabilitating real estate for housing, and overall community improvement. Establishment of a land bank will reduce property maintenance expenses and resources, decrease unauthorized occupancy and use of vacant and abandoned properties, and generate tax revenue from properties that are currently delinquent. There's an initial investment of $2,500 from each participating entity to go toward various administrative expenses such as legal filings, articles of incorporation, and filing 990s in order to get the land bank underway. Once it's legally established, the land bank can immediately obtain properties from a list of forfeited lands which did not sell at previous sheriff's sales. These properties would be acquired through foreclosure if the taxes and charges exceed the value of the property, or they can be transferred directly to the land bank. Examples of this include accepting a deed in lieu of foreclosure or as a donation. Properties eligible for the land bank acquisition include those with liens for unpaid water bills, assessed demolition costs, or unpaid taxes. In many cases, a buyer would not be willing to pay the lien on a property as that cost might exceed the overall value of the property. So through the land bank, these properties could be renovated, used to build a new home through Habitat or a private developer, or even sold to an adjacent property owner. And all of these options would sustain or improve neighboring property values. As the city already has a list of properties for which it could get started on once the land bank is officially incorporated, I'm prepared to suspend the rules and move this to third and final reading tonight unless any of my fellow councilmen wish to have more time to consider the resolution.
Oh, Ms. Warden, I appreciate your explanation on this. I know I had a long conversation with one of the commissioners back, it might have been last fall, regarding this topic. And I get for me, I have a little different take on how this just seems to be another means in which government can take control of private property and utilize it at their will. And you know, maybe I'm taking a little bit of an extremist view on it, but I just this whole piece of legislation and the whole proposal therein, I really don't support in any fashion. So I guess I just wanted to get that out in the open right now.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, for those thoughts. I guess if I wouldn't have come down a very different road, I could feel the same way just having, reading through this. But I've had a number of complaints that have increased over the past year on certain properties, specifically in my ward. And I wanted to underscore what Ms. Warden just went over. One piece of that is one of the main powers of a land bank being the waiving of tax liens on delinquent properties. And certain properties that I think, as the administration likes to call them, they're kind of underwater, if you will. They have more owed in taxes and more liens attached and more tax dollars weighing them down than they're worth. So, and I have seen, I have called the auditor's office. I've called the a number of city and county officials, talking with a county commissioner, all the way to other offices of the county, like I said, the auditor's office, the treasurer's office is the word I'm looking for, and just trying to mitigate issues, because we have neighbors and grass is chronically too high, and so the city comes in and has to mow. The property's in decay. There's issues with it's continuing to the point where there's weeds growing out the roof. I mean, these are all very real issues. And so, one of the things that I wrestled with before tonight, Mr. Sanders, was, we've never needed this before. Why do we need it now? And that's one question as a council representative I try to ask myself. But I think these are unprecedented times, as we all, if we want to sit back and be honest. Part of the reason we're meeting the way we are tonight is because these are unprecedented times and these are difficult days. And so I think that we have to adapt based on the situation. So as much as I don't like the fact that we're establishing another group that has power, to acquire and take care of these properties, where are they going to go? If they're underwater, there's no end in sight on some of these. And thankfully our building standards department works with the administration to, get some funding, some grant funding to level these things. But really the only entity that can waive tax liens on a delinquent property is a land bank. And I remember talking about a year ago with someone in the finance world who said, Dave, really your only option is to go for a land bank. And that's when I started, thinking about this and learning about these things. So I'm happy to see this come to fruition. It's unfortunate that we have to be here today talking about this many properties that are delinquent and that are creating hazards. But if this is where we are, this is a way to fix the problem. And in that spirit, I would support it. Thank you.
Mr. Bostancic?
Sure. I actually think this is a pretty exciting piece of legislation. I think it also should be noted that this is not just a recent phenomena, that we've had these vacant lands and degenerating houses on land where the owners do not repair anything, they just let sit. But this has been going on for years and years. I believe somebody in the administration at one point told me, I think even, was it below in Ward 1, there's at least 50 vacant properties, either vacant or they have a house on that's being just decaying. I don't know, is that close? Am I close to that, Andrew? Is that Andrew? No, is it?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate, or even more.
Or even more. And that's just in one ward. I think once the land becomes part of the land bank, the city would basically control that piece of property as to what goes on it and how much we sell it for, or how we sell it. Is that also true?
Well, the land bank would control it.
The land bank would control it, but we'd have. So I look at it too as taking a piece of property that's been basically abandoned for years and turning it into, well, it was already mentioned, a tax base that would grow. But also help alleviate some of the housing shortages. I would imagine you can say, perhaps, if you take this piece of property, you have to build a duplex in it or a small home or whatever. At some point, they're going to. Most of those are in most of those are houses. Yeah, I'm sorry. Most of those are in zone for housing, I believe. So, I think it could be a possibility for that. It would. I think this piece of legislation can have a significant, could be significantly help a problem such as this in the future. I think this is something that's been needed for a long time. That's it for now.
Thank you. And I agree. I have a nearby home in my neighborhood that I've spoken with several of my neighbors about, and they've had run-ins with the city with property maintenance for a number of years now. And someone mentioned, weeds, and actually I think there's part of a tree growing in the gutters. It just brings down everyone's property value. And young couples live in my neighborhood. They're trying to sell their homes, and it's, that's not something that a potential buyer wants to see across the street, if you understand what I mean. So, Mr. Ansel, did you have something to contribute?
No, I think it's a great initiative. It's a viable tool to effectively address and manage some of these distressed properties, and it's a win-win for all involved. The community, low to income, moderate housing expenses, and to have a consortium control within Wayne County brings the economies of scale together across all the communities within our county. And I think it can be a very, very effective tool. Land banks are wondrous vehicles. This isn't a new initiative. It's tried and true. It's perhaps long overdue within Wayne County. And I just commend the county and the various cities administrations for their effective collaboration on this initiative. I think it offers great future promise.
I just have a quick question for Joel, if I could, Jen.
Sure.
Joel, in your letter to council, the first sentence says, this legislation being requested for as one of the final pieces needed to establish a land bank. Is there something else that has to happen if we pass this?
They would have to officially organize the land bank itself. They would have to do things like they would have to establish a bank account, and those kinds of things, elect officers.
But we wouldn't have any other legislative piece in this after that.
I do not believe so at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to add,
Scott Myers. The only thing that might be I like the land bank idea, and I like the purpose and what it will support. With regard to the city and what's best for the city, we'll only have the one representative on the board, so potentially the county will basically have control over decisions made by this group. Just pointing that out. I don't think there's a problem. I'm just pointing it out.
The way that land banks are set up, only counties can set a land bank up. That's part of the reason this has now finally made it in front of you, is it's been something that the county hasn't wanted to move forward over the past years. So we're thrilled that we're to this point. I think it has a potential for a lot of good for our community. And slum and blight is a problem on many properties because they are, as you say, underwater, and there's no seeing the top. And so this is a way to erase some of the taxes that are already sitting there, and without doing it through a land bank, there's really no other way to do it. So it will help revitalize certain areas of the city.
if I could also chime in, I just wanted to ask the question, maybe to relieve some of the concerns, because it was one of the initial concerns that I shared, and that is, are there sufficient criteria in place? And by the way, Jen Warden, Miss Warden, I appreciate you providing more detail than what was even in our packets. So I appreciate your research and bringing forth some of those more detailed components to what this entails. But this is aimed at the reclamation, rehabilitation, and reutilization of vacant, abandoned, tax foreclosed, or other real property in the county. And I just, to Craig Sanders' point, Councilman Sanders' point, I wanted to make sure when we say or other real property in the county, is there a set of criteria beyond which the land bank group that I know that the county is going to have the majority in this group, but is there a set of criteria they must abide by in terms of acquiring one of these properties?
Mr. Montgomery, do you have a response to that?
There are criteria in the revised code for that. Okay. I would say that, to give you an example, like the first 5 properties on our list are all vacant properties.
Right.
Those are properties that already, unfortunately, we did not have a land bank at the time. So those, got significantly behind on their taxes. They were basically abandoned by the owners. They were condemned and we tore the houses down. So we had costs incurred. Some of them we are mowing on a regular basis, so we are paying to mow them. So there are neighbors that would like to purchase them, for various reasons, and other people would like to purchase them to build a house, but the taxes owed are too much for that. So
Sure.
in those cases, one of almost the only way to get those back into a useful situation would be for a land bank to get it, wipe out the taxes, and then turn around and sell that, to another entity.
Right. Thank you, Joel. And Mr. Montgomery, to your point, you and I are paying our taxes to mow these properties because we're attaching the bill to the tax duplicate, and we know where that's going. Absolutely nowhere. It's not getting paid.
So if I could also contribute to what Mr. Montgomery said, I reviewed all of the pertinent sections in the Ohio Revised Code, and it does state in there that no land bank is able to use eminent domain to take a property. So I think that's important to acknowledge. It's not that, if the city can just decide that they want, this street because it would fold into their development plans. It has to meet these criteria. And I'm sure that the representatives that we've got, appointing to the land bank will keep that in mind.
Good point, Ms. Worden. Thank you for that.
Sure. In that case, I would like to move to suspend the rules and place resolution 2020-42 on third and final reading.
I'll second that, Mr. Silvestri.
Okay, Ms. Warden moved to suspend the rules. It was seconded by Mr. Silvestri. If you would, Mr. Paulo, please call the roll on the suspension of the rules.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
and Warden.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended. I look to you again, Ms. Warden, for another motion.
Thank you. I move to adopt.
Motion
to adopt by Ms. Warden. Was that Mr. Bostancic?
Yes, that was Bill.
I see his hand in the dark there. Second by Mr. Bostancic. Any further discussion?
My only comment is I'm glad we're voting on it, so read the ordinance next time.
Yeah. Yeah, we might have to have an EMS squad on hand if she has to read it again. I think there were good points on either side brought up, and everyone who's been on council for a while knows how hard it is to offload these properties when you have to work with the county in terms of getting the property taxes eliminated, and it just most of the time impossible unless in rare circumstances. So, and you're looking at a guy that is always railing about let's not give up our authority, but in this case, even though there might be 2 commissioners, there's going to be more people who are not on the county commission that will be on the board. So that gives me some comfort that it's not just going to be railroaded by the commissioners. There's going to be an actual dialogue. Anything else? If you would, Mr. Paulo, would you call the roll for the motion to adopt?
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
No.
Silvestri,
Yes.
and Warden.
Yes.
Well, I think 5 out of 6, this resolution does pass, and I appreciate everyone's viewpoint, and hopefully we can turn unproductive property into property that's on the taxpayers' rolls again, because obviously we get a little money from them, but it's the school system that gets hurt the worst because they have the higher percentage of the property tax. All right, that brings us to, I am going to need a motion to go into executive session to discuss purchase of property and union negotiations pursuant to 121.22G24.
So moved.
Motion to go into executive session by Ms. Borden. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Sylvester.
Second, Mr. Silvestri. Would you please call the roll? We have to have a roll call vote. So if you would call the roll, please, Mr. Paulo.
Stanzik,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Okay, we will be going in executive session, which means at the moment now we are off the record. So,
Is everybody ready?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
well, we've come out of what is actually called the breakout room for these virtual meetings. And before we can go back officially on the record, we need a motion, a second, and a roll call vote to come out of executive session.
I'll second.
Mr. Bostancic moved to come out of executive session. John Ansel seconded the motion. Would you please call the roll for the approval of the motion to come out of executive session?
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Okay, we are now officially back on the record. We're looking at item 9, new business continued. There are 3 pieces of legislation. The first one is ordinance number 2020-30. It'll be presented by Ms. Warden. It is slated for 3 readings. If you would, Mr. Paulo, please read this. It is short. I note it's much shorter than the last one.
Ordinance number 2020-30. An ordinance authorizing the purchase of real estate and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Warden, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Earlier this year, the city purchased approximately 140 acres of land known as 5L Farm, located north of Daisy Way between Melrose Drive and Gyers Chapel Road. Recently, an additional 4 parcels comprising 5.64 acres and situated within the geographic boundaries of the 5L Farm has become available for purchase. The property contains 2 residential homes, an 1880s farmhouse and a log cabin built in 1983, as well as a large garage. The owners wish to downsize and recently approached the city following the acquisition of the 5L Farm to discuss purchasing, the city purchasing the land. Cost for these 4 parcels is $285,000, a portion of which could potentially be offset with a Jobs Ohio grant, conditioned on the property being dedicated to primary sector industry. Acquiring and later dismantling or leveling the site will greatly enhance the marketability of the Ohio Worcester Innovation Industrial Park, which I learned this evening is a working name. It will specifically make 23 acres of land readily developable along Daisy Way. Currently, the property in question effectively obstructs development for the first 700 feet of frontage along Daisy Way and reduces the amount of developable property due to residential setback restrictions for industrial sites. By purchasing and demolishing these four parcels, the total developable area will increase to 150 acres. The city is coordinating with Team Neo and Jobs Ohio to market the property and is actively applying for more than $100,000 in funding from the Ohio Site Inventory Program to assist with acquisition expenses and demolition. Additionally, the city is exploring assistance options for the closure of several wells on the surrounding 5L farm. Jobs Ohio has awarded an in-kind environmental services with an estimated value of between $40,000 and $60,000, and AEP has extended $20,000 in funding for due diligence work. Council has received letters in support of this purchase from Team Neo, the Jobs Ohio network partner, and also from Wayne Economic Development Council, each emphasizing that the enhanced value and appeal that this purchase will give to the Ohio Worcester Innovation Industrial Park. As it stands, I would like to keep this ordinance on first reading this evening and revisit during our next council meeting. Are there any questions in the meantime? Okay.
Mr. Beitendijk, you're muted.
Maybe we should wait until next meeting since Mr. Cavan isn't here and we won't have to revisit the same issues again. So we can just consider that first reading. There's a lot to digest there, and we can have that at the next council meeting. So,
yeah, I'll just remind everyone that the owners of the property are looking to have a decision by the end of September. So if possible, ideally, it'd be nice to have a decision from the group at the next meeting. Of course, we can postpone it to the third reading if need be.
right. Okay, ordinance number 2020-30 has had its first reading. That brings us to ordinance number 2020-33. Did I write that down right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it's out of sequence. So I see why, because we put these at the end. Never mind. This will be presented by Mr. Ansel, and it's slated for 3 readings. For the penultimate piece of legislation tonight, Ms. DePaula, would you please read the title?
Ordinance number 2020-33. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Administration to enter into an agreement extending the collective bargaining agreement for 1 year with representatives of the Worcester Firefighters Union, IAFF Local 764, and declaring an emergency.
And Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we have 2 very reassuring and timely ordinances this evening, both related to our safety services bargaining units. The first one on the agenda is for the Worcester Firefighters Union. We have reached mutual agreement, consensus between the bargaining unit and the administration. Now council will approve it this evening or vote on it this evening. And it's to extend a 3-year contract, an additional year with a increase of 2.5% of their base compensation. And then, as we've done in the past in a similar situation, a stipend, one-time payout incentive for contract extension of $1,500. And both parties agree that this is reasonable, and we've verified that with comparatives of similar sized municipalities and forces within Ohio. We currently have about 43, 45 in each department, safety services. It's within budgetary parameters and can be funded. And based on, our times of uncertainty that we're experiencing and the issues at hand, this is a very reasonable compromise. And again, I congratulate both parties for being able to work through this in a reasonable and consistent fashion. And I'm hoping tonight that we have approval to proceed with these two initiatives, extend for a year, return to normalcy, and then in 2021, commence the next 3-year negotiations with each of the bargaining unit. But first is the ordinance 2020-33 for the Worcester Firefighters Union, IAFF Local 764. We should be very proud of our safety services, our firefighters, our EMTs, and our law enforcement during these troubled times. We have very, very consistent, as we heard tonight, with Chief Fisher's commendations for our officers going above and beyond the call. Hopefully, based on this very reasonable compromise, we can move this through quickly and send our endorsement that we appreciate their dedication, their loyalty, their efforts, and their reasonableness relative to resolving these sometimes volatile and emotional issues. So we had a very robust executive session. Thank you, administration, for your preparation, and Chief Saley and Chief Fisher for your input. It's wonderful that we can be in such a position, and I would motion to suspend the rules this evening and move ordinance 2020-33 to third and final reading.
Mr. Ansell's moved to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bastancik.
Yes.
And the rules are suspended. I look to you, Mr. Ansel, for
Motion to
another
adopt,
motion.
Mr. President.
Motion
Second.
to adopt by Mr. Ansel, and there was a second
Second.
by Mr. Myers. Further discussion, questions?
Mr.
comments?
Ansel,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ansel, I'd like to offer an amendment that the stipend be 2,500, not 1,500.
We can go ahead and make the proper procedures for the recommendation as presented by Mr. Myers. Mr. Beitendijk, I'll let you champion that amendment motion.
Well, I think Mr. Myers needs to move to amend the amount of the stipend in the
Mr. Beitendijk, President Beitendijk, I'd like to make a motion to move to amend the stipend for each member of our firefighters and police force to 2,500 for this 1 year.
let's just deal with ordinance number 2020-33, please.
I thought that's what you had asked me to do.
Yeah, but you said police force and firefighters.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot they were not combined. You're right.
Yeah. See, I might be old, but I'm still awake.
Yeah,
awake.
well, it's getting late. I'm not sure I'm going to be awake much later, but okay. Yes, I apologize. Certainly just specifically for this ordinance.
There has been a motion by Mr. Myers to amend the stipend amount from 1,500 to 2,500. Is there a second? Well, seeing none, I think the motion fails. Is that correct, Mr. Scavelli?
It is.
All right. So now we're go back to the original motion, which was a motion to adopt ordinance number 2020-33. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Yeah, our Chief Saley, do you find this to be fair under the circumstances?
Based under the circumstances and the comparables that have been provided by our HR division and some of the information that the union president had forwarded to me about other similar organizations, I believe this percentage raise is in the ballpark and fair based on the current circumstances.
Okay. So
obviously, I'm very proud of all the work that my staff has done fighting through the particular pandemic. But from a monetary perspective, I think the administration and the union have done their due diligence.
Well, we're proud of your fire department, and we want to always try to be fair. And these are trying times for everyone, and if the parties are somewhat satisfied, I guess you can't ask for anything more under the circumstances. So, seeing no other discussion, I would ask Mr. Paulo to call the roll on the motion to adopt.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Bastancik?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2020-33 passes. I hope the union firefighters union will do the same and approve of it, but we certainly appreciate all their efforts and a difficult job made even more difficult where there's a killer virus out there. So thank you, firefighters. That brings us to our final ordinance for consideration, which is 2020-34. It'll be presented by Mr. Ansel and slated for 3 readings, and we will call upon you, Mr. Paulo, to read one last ordinance tonight.
Ordinance number 2020-34. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Administration to enter into an agreement extending the collective bargaining agreement for 1 year with representatives of the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours.
Yes, this is a mere compensation issue similar to the one we just previously approved. I commented on behalf of all our safety services. So this is the identical piece, creating parity within our safety service staffs. This one pertains to the Worcester Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, or the Ohio Benevolence Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, our police force. It's a 2.5% merit increase, $1,500 stipend for contract extension purposes. And I would motion to suspend the rules this evening and move ordinance 2020-34 to third and final reading.
Second.
I'll make it. I'll second.
You're muted, Mr. Breitendike.
Mr. Ansel moved to suspend the rules, and I did hear Ms. Morden's voice first seconding it. So sometimes it pays to be the lone female voice on council. So if you would please call the roll on the suspension of the rules, I'd appreciate it, Mr. Paulo.
Myers?
No.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
Bastancik?
Yes.
If memory serves me correct, we can't go forward tonight.
So because we have how many votes did we end up having? We had
Five approving it, 5 suspending the rules, approving suspension of the rules, and 1 against it.
So we need 2/3. So let me think. 5 and yeah, let me think about that. Hold on one second.
I don't think we have it.
Yeah, you should have it. 4.7 is the number that you need out of 7 votes per council. 2/3 of that is 4.67. So rounded up to 5. So if you have 5 affirmative, that should still carry the day to suspend the rules.
Yeah, because we have over.
You have over the amount that you need.
Because each third, yeah.
Well, 2/3 of 7 is, 4.7.
Yep. And you have 5.
And yeah, so we do have 5.
Yep. So you've got it to move it forward.
And it is 2/3, I think.
It is 2/3 for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we do have enough. So,
Good.
Any
Motion to adopt.
motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Warden. Any further discussion?
President Biden, Mr. Ansel, I'd like to support a motion to amend the resolution to increase the stipend to $2,500 for the police force.
All right, Mr. Myers has made a motion to amend the ordinance number 2020-34 with regard to stipend and increasing it from 1,500 to 2,500. Is there a second?
Not likely. Thanks for your support.
Well, I gave it a good almost 30 seconds and there was no seconds, so I would.
You gave it the college try. Thank you, President Biden. Thank you.
We'll find that the motion fails. So based on that, any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 2020-34 passes. That brings us to the miscellaneous portion, and I appreciated that video that was presented at the beginning of this evening. You have to be very proud, as young as those guys are. You must feel almost like a proud father there, Chief Fisher, and I got a big kick out of it too, because one of them is I've known the family for a number of years, so it warmed the cockles of my heart. And you have a great police department, and those young guys exemplify, what that department's all about, and the more seasoned veterans probably, have helped curry their abilities that they have. And thank you very much to the three of them. And Chief Saley, thanks for your efforts with your own department. So now, we'll start with Mr. Bostancic on the miscellaneous portion.
Nothing further.
Okay. Mr. Sanders?
Nothing to add, Mr. President.
All right. Mr. Ansel?
Nothing more, Mr. President. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Mr. Myers?
Nothing further. Thank you to the officers at the police force and congratulations on their awards.
Mr. Silvestri?
Yes, I did just want to mention our officers and their awards. Nathaniel Koch, Michael Egbert, Christopher Hartzler for the life-saving awards and award of merit respectively, and also for Sergeant Tom Weber, recognizing their acts of valor and the work that they did. So thank you so much. We're blessed to have such a police force. Thanks.
And Ms. Warden, the winner of the longest and I think shortest piece of legislation tonight, we'll give you the last word.
Thank you. And if I know it's been a long night, if you would just indulge me for a moment. I'd like to, first of all, extend my appreciation to Officer Matt Cruz and to Shannon Waller from Main Street Worcester and the other members of the community, including Everything Rubbermaid, that have been working recently to keep the square clean. And I think that it goes a long way. People really appreciate it. And it just shows that people from every end of the spectrum really care about keeping our downtown safe and clean. And I was really happy to see that. Additionally, I just wanted to address the petition to Worcester Mayor and City Council to address racial injustice. I know there's been some question as to whether or not the council members have received this. I'd like to say that we have received the petition, and it's very brief, so I'm going to read it really quick just so that everyone is, if you haven't received it, you understand what it says. Recent events all over the nation have served as a reminder that the power of racism is deep-seated and endemic to our country and communities. While Worcester may not face the same degree of problems as some of the places that have been in the headlines, it is undeniable that racism still affects the Worcester community in ways large and small. The sheer scale of the problem and the variety of ways in which racism affects all of our lives, not equally but differentially, also means that we all have to be we all have a part to play in working toward justice and helping to right the wrongs of our collective condition. There is no one-size-fits-all set of solutions to these issues, but every community has been called to address the issues of racism, inequality, and related social problems anew. This is a time to re-examine existing policy, develop new policy, and make progress toward a more equitable future for all City of Worcester residents. As elected leaders, you all have a particular role to play in signaling and carrying out the values of this community. While much work is before us and some of the changes may take months or years, we undersigned ask that you engage in this work with focus and dedication. We look forward to this work beginning in the collective spirit that can sustain lasting change. Thank you for attention in this matter. I just want it to be noted that this has been heard by the members of council present this evening, and please continue to contact us via email. I know it's difficult for people to respond to you during Facebook Live or YouTube Live when we're in these meetings. You are being heard, but until we have concrete examples of steps that we can take as a body, it's virtually impossible for us to really take any steps beyond reading your petition to ourselves. So thank you, and I move to adjourn.
I motion
Second.
to adjourn, second by Mr. Ansel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, one and all.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.